Hey, She Slayers, and welcome to another episode of She Slays the Day podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lauryn Brunswick, and this is my favorite time of year because we are doing our best of 2024 episodes. So this is part one. Part two will be coming next week. But today is short clips from a couple. I don't know how many do we got in here. We got 4 or 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ooh, we got 5 in this one. All right. And I'm just like, look, because I'm so prepared. I chose the best of, but I'm like, all right, who do we got in here? This is a good mix up for you today. You're going to like it. So these are short little clips from some of the best episodes that performed the best this year. So how we pick them, it's not a like teacher's pet situation. These are based on number of downloads and number of impact. So impact is how many times it was shared, how many times we received comments and things like that on it. So also, this does mean that December episodes get totally discriminated against, which now that I'm saying it, what I should just do is include December of the previous year so they have a fair chance. Okay, that's what we're going to do next year. Best of 2025 is going to include December of 2024 opportunities so they have a chance because there's some good ones that happen in December and they never stand a chance. Okay. Let's see. What do we have? I don't have any updates for you. What I am going to do, because we're going to be talking this whole little thing, is I picked my favorite listener highlight that we got on Apple in 2024. So this is a must listen for chiropractors. I am so thankful for what Dr. Lauryn does for the chiropractic community. I started listening to her and have been truly inspired. I definitely feel heard by her shows. She brings up important issues within our chiropractic community. I just began listening to and am implementing as much as I can from what she discusses. It has already been very beneficial, easy to follow, and down to earth. And this was by Dr. Lord, DC. Amen. Okay, so we'll pray and then we're going to get into our first guest or like little mini clip. Oh, just feeling spicy today. I have a consult. Sorry, we're not praying yet. I have a strategy meeting with a podcast professional. So Tracy O'Malley, I don't know that she made it into the best of because it was very specific advice to chiropractors, or not to chiropractors, to podcast hosts. She was earlier this year. And so I scheduled a strategy session with her to see, because I've told you guys I have a goal of getting to the top 1%. So if you didn't see it on stories, wait, I'm really diving off course here. So I was like, I wrote down a goal, like as I started thinking about 2025, like I want to get into the top 5% of podcasts. And then I looked up the stats on the top 5% of podcasts and I was like, oh, there's my Minnesota. Oh, we're kind of there. So that's not really a stretch, which was cool. But also, did I celebrate and go like, oh my gosh, I did it? No. I was like, all right, scratch out 5%, put 1%. So that means we need to get to like 4,000 to 5,000 downloads within the first 7 days of dropping. It's totally doable. It's totally doable. But I just might need a little bit more strategy, like than my ADHD brain that's like, I don't know what I'm doing over here. We're just kicking it and having fun. I don't know why that was relevant. Oh, I know why it was relevant. Because I'm worried that the strategist is going to tell me she does not recommend me continuing to pray in the beginning. And I'm not saying I'm not going to listen cuz but I'm also not saying I am going to listen. So, it would be lovely if somebody validates like, no, that's okay. It makes you unique and quirky and it's cute versus like, ew, you're alienating your audience and they're probably just fast forwarding past it. Don't know. Okay. Dear universe and God and all the podcasting vibes, thank you for the incredible humans who tuned in, laughed, cried, and extra prayers for those that hit the subscribe button in 2024. And for all of my amazing guests who dropped just so much truth, pulled back that veil of vulnerability, and didn't ghost my emails. May 2025 bless us with endless creativity, abundance in all the ways, and no technical glitches. And if it's not too much to ask, maybe help this podcast go viral for a moment or two if it's worthy. Well, no, just asking. If that's too much to ask. Just disregard that last part. Amen. Okay. So, episode 1, who do we got? Oh, Baron Hoag. Oh, such good episode. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is episode 253. Okay, 253. So Baron Hoag, he's not a chiropractor, but he's been like a chiropractic advocate for a really long time. We're naming this segment Keep the Opinion, Drop the Judgment. Okay. So in this episode, Baron has spoke on so many chiropractic stages. And I remember this part of his episode because he kind of calls out vitalistic chiros for being the jerkiest of the, like, that, like, round up the wagons and we shoot in. Like, he calls out that some of the vitalistic ones are maybe some of the ones that need to drop some of the most judgment. I don't know. I'm not saying I agree. I'm just telling you what he said. I've definitely been on the receiving end of this. For those that stalk me enough on Instagram, you know that, like a couple weeks ago, some Cairo dude just came at me, and we took the conversation into the DMs, and I try, like, politely disarming him, being like, "Hey, you've been following me. You should know, like, I love this profession, this and that." And he's like, "No, I have been following you, and you're not," like, basically, I'm just not Cairo enough for him. So whatever. What are you gonna do? Just gonna yeah, all right. It was fine. It was fine. I didn't say his name, so I feel like I kept it classy. So, here is clip from episode 253, Baron Hoig, Keep the Opinion, Drop the Judgment. What do you feel specifically the vitalistic chiropractors, like, what kind of shifts need to happen in the messaging? Because you said, like, you're alienating more, or like, I'm not going to say a we, because, like, I don't know. I don't know
Yeah,
where I
yeah,
am in
yeah.
life. I'm still just like, I'm likable, like me. But, like, where does that messaging, could you see, like, shifts of still holding on to those subluxation-based
Yeah,
values,
yeah.
but not being so alienating?
I really think it's easier than people think because I don't think anything needs to change other than your judgment of people that don't think like you think. That's all that needs to change. If we're just more receptive, right? If we just celebrate the fact that someone else has a different view than I have. Where the rub comes from is when I start telling you you need to believe the way I believe or what you believe is wrong. This goes into politics, this goes into religion, this goes into marriages, this goes into parenting, right? If we're a little bit more, if we just have such security in where we're at, and we have a genuine desire to learn from other people that do things differently than we do, it creates an environment of collaboration. I mean, we were just talking about it with UAC, and that room is so different because everyone's there with a desire to collaborate, not to be like anyone, but to learn things they don't know and find opportunities to collaborate with people that are better at things than they are. That mindset, when there's no threat, and that's part of the problem. Even our more vitalistic chiropractors, our subluxation based, our philosophy based chiropractors, there's still a poverty mindset there. Like we still struggle with this idea that if we let anyone in, we're going to somehow lose everything we have. And that's false. You know, one of my best definitions of fear is that fear is not real. It's a figment of your imagination causing you to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That danger is real, but fear is a choice. And I love that because it's true. We fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. And so that insecurity is what drives the separation. Part of the reason I can get along with everybody is I'm not asking you to believe the way that I believe, but I do want to understand why you believe the way you do. Not in a challenging way, but I want to understand it. Why do you like blue M&Ms better than black? That's just weird to me. I don't care. I'm going to throw them all in my mouth. But why for you is it blue? And then I come to find
Mhm.
out that blue has some sentimental value to you when you were a child. And so you just have a predisposition to blue tasting better in your mind, even though at the end of the day, they're the exact same flavor. Right.
Right.
But now I know something more about you that before I would have said, you're just a high maintenance piece of garbage, eat all the M&Ms. But now I understand why blue is there. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you remembering things and keeps you focused on your mission. So
Mhm.
when we can step back from the insecurities we have, because the only time we judge others, honestly, psychologically, is when we're trying to validate ourselves. Otherwise, we don't care. Because there are a lot of things we see and don't even give attention to, but then we'll pick something else out that we determine to make a comment or we have to make a judgment. All that's doing is in some way validating in me that I'm okay and they're wrong.
Right.
When you're not doing that, when you don't need that to be
You
identified
don't
or
need
to
to
be
be
valued,
validated.
yeah, then man, the desire to collaborate is there. So if we could get, and this is what I shared that room this past weekend, if we as a group of people that believe a specific way, let's just say vitalistic, that chiropractic is about the adjustment, it's about subluxation, it's about getting the world to understand they need to be adjusted regularly. If that group of people would just be more organized and louder, not louder in judgment, but louder in message, then we would capture the 80% of our profession that's in the middle, that's just tired of both ends.
Right.
And they don't want to, they just want a home and they don't know where to go. So they're just staying by themselves. And people don't realize this in chiropractic. We have in the United States, we have two national organizations. We have the ACA and the ICA. Obviously, they're on the ends of the spectrum, right? One would say the ACA is mechanistic, the ICA is vitalistic. Together combined, they have right around 7,000 paying members combined. There are 82,000 licensed chiropractors in the US.
Mm. So most people are like, F both of you.
They're checked out. They don't
Right.
have faith in either organization. They don't believe that either one of them are going to do anything for them. And then let's take it to a state level. All 50 states have at least one association. Some states have two for the same reason
We
we
have
have two
two.
nationals.
We have
Yeah,
two.
Wisconsin has two.
Same
Yep.
difference.
Right. But then you look at those combined. Let's combine both the associations in Wisconsin. Still only represents 40,000 or 40% of the chiros in the state of Wisconsin. So you have 60% of the chiropractors in the state that are like, I don't want a part of anybody. I'm going to do my own thing. So that tells you right away there's no trust. There is zero trust or belief that these organizations are going to do anything for me. And so when you scale that to a profession that's, I mean, there are more than 80,000 MDs in Columbus, Ohio, and we only have 80,000 across the entire United States. We're very small as numerically of a profession. We don't have the reason that we're plateaued. The reason that we can't get anything done is because we're segmented. There's no way that your national or state associations can accomplish anything that you want individually because they don't have the resources or the time, and they're not willing to make a stand and boldly stand on any principle because it's going to polarize the small percentage of members they have anyway. So they just stay neutral, which pisses everybody off. I wish my association would fight for me. And they can't. I mean, they literally institutionally cannot do it. So this is why our profession has been stagnant. So if we could just get our group of people to say, you're not a competitor, you're a colleague. You're not a competitor, you're a colleague. You're not a competitor, you're a colleague. And then imagine just in your town, and you said it's a small town. Well, let's just say 3 of the smaller towns around you feeding into whatever big city that feeds your guys' towns. If the like-minded chiropractors in those groups all came together and say, hey, we're all going to put in $100 a month, and we're going to start doing commercials in movie theaters around here because we know in Wisconsin, a lot of people go to movies, and we're just going to do together just a general chiropractic that you need to be adjusted regularly, just a commercial. None of them, we're not sending them to a website. We're not doing anything. We're just going to message chiropractic. It's going to cost you next to nothing as an individual. But as a group, you could own most of the real estate in the movie theaters around that area, telling people to consider chiropractic. Do you know how easy that would be done? If that's the mindset. So if we could just organize and we could be louder with our message, we would capture more of the profession, and we'd be able to have Super Bowl commercials. We'd be able to have all of these things. And a bunch of us are just doing a little bit to get it done. But it isn't until that mindset changes that the only way I get what I want is by making those around me better. And that's something chiropractic doesn't have. You're instilled literally from, my daughter just graduated from Sherman a year ago, and I love Sherman. This is not a knock on them, but I had to unbrainwash her from what she was taught in clinic, because she was taught a lot of bad habits that continue to create segmentation that cause her to fear the adjustment rather than embrace it. And so it's systemic within chiropractic, kind of like the Hatfield and McCoy. We hate them because we've always hated them. And
Right.
that's just, there's no reason. We just hate them because we've always hated them. My grandpa hated them, so I hate them. And that's got to stop. And so that's the thing. If I could get our group to understand, we have the answers. I believe wholeheartedly the way that we practice, the way that you practice is the best way to practice for everybody. It's the most lucrative financially. It is the most rewarding emotionally. It's the most beneficial as far as outcomes and the impact you have in your community. And there's less tension and strife because you're not dealing with insurance companies and dealing with all these external factors you can't control. For those four reasons, I believe the way you and I practice is the right way to practice. But that's right for me. There are some people that love that fight. So I don't care. But if we are more willing to share our stories in a non arrogant, non condemning way, we will start magnetizing people over to be like, why are they always so happy? Why do they have time to be able to go to UAC events 3 times a year? How do they do that? How do they keep their clinic going? I can barely do that. I can't take vacations because my clinic drops every time I leave. Like they don't know a different reality because they're so cut off and segmented. If we're more organized and louder, we will win this because I do believe we have the truth. But if we keep pointing our finger and saying, you're wrong, I'm right, all we're going to keep doing is putting up walls. So there's a very long answer to your simple question.
Okay, yep. Loved it, right? See? He is such a good guy. The entire episode is that way. So, like, if you didn't listen to it, go listen. This next segment is Dr. David Bidler, and this is episode 284. Um, I've stalked David on Instagram for a long time. He's doing something really incredible and bringing to the forefront this topic of mental health in adolescence, because we do have such an epidemic of diagnosis. And I don't think that the mental health is like, I don't think that the diagnosing is wrong. I do think we have more mental health issues than we've had. But I don't think we're addressing the root of why. So, in this segment, David is challenging the way we think about mental health, and he's making the case for a shift towards, instead of calling it mental health, calling it brain health, and how understanding brain health can empower us. I mean, honestly, the advice is good for us adults too, but and our children to thrive. We talk about technology, our motivation and well being, and why defining health proactively could transform our lives. In this episode, not in this clip, but like we also talk about how maybe like the Department of Education should be overthrown. I don't know if Elon and Ron Paul and them are going to take that on in 2025. We'll see. So, this is episode 284, David Bidler, Redefining Mental Health. So, are you saying that the mental health is potentially less, like you're less worried or you're dealing with less anxiety and depression because you have this drive to survive more?
Oh, well, we can let's like maybe we pause a second and think about maybe one of the great linguistic challenges of our time is that the word mental health is a term from 1908 and it's 2024 and it's become nebulous and abstract, undefinable, and somewhat dangerous. You know, yesterday was World Mental Health Day, and I had our students here. We were all talking about this, and we're on Instagram, and every post was like somebody had their head down, their eyes closed. It was like mental health. It's like health means health. Health is good. Health doesn't mean illness, even though we talk about it in this weird Orwellian backwards way. So we're using the term mental health to talk about what clearly to the public at large means depression, anxiety, addiction,
Mhm.
suicidality, isolation. But health means health. Illness means illness, and health is a proactive engagement with your own brain and body. I just had this conversation in the sauna with some of our students. And they were like, why are we talking about mental health like it's a bad thing? Health is never a bad thing. Health is a good thing.
Mhm.
That's how far we are from having a proactive conversation on building the brain, building the body, and making sure that when we talk about mental health, I'll give an actual example of this with students. But when we talk about mental health, we should be talking about health. When we talk about mental illness, we should be talking about illness. But you can't conflate these words. It's very, very confusing. It confuses the cultural conversation. Why would World Mental Health Day be a sad day?
Mhm.
Because we're not using the words accurately. We're not thinking them through. I gave this thought exercise to a group of students recently, high school students. And I said, what do you think about when you hear the term mental health? They said depression. I think about addiction. I think about anxiety, I think about isolation. I said, what do you think about when you hear the term brain health? They said, I think about focus, I think about memory, I think about skill acquisition, skill building, I think about motivation. So we have to be really clear, I think, to realize that mental health is a term from the early 1900s, and it has no cultural meaning that we can agree upon. But brain health is amazing because we have a brain in our heads, and that's pretty cool. And you can build it, you can program it, you can make it healthier, you can grow it like a plant. And if you understand that, if we tell kids to understand that, then we can get to the heart of whether something, again, is rooted in biology or psychology. Of course, there are crossovers, but when we mash the two things, to give a direct example, if any of us, if you or I or your audience were to scroll on Instagram for hours, we would take our baseline level of dopamine, the brain chemical responsible for motivation and for focus, and we would lower it systemically. So we would get excited by an influencer or an advertisement or some TikTok video. Dopamine levels would go up above baseline, and then they would return slightly below the baseline. Extrapolate that out for an hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours, and we are neurophysiologically depressed. We are in a dopamine deficit. That is a brain health issue.
Mhm.
That is not a psychiatric issue. That's certainly not not a psychiatric issue. That now, where the two worlds get very often mixed, and I think this really speaks to the complexity of our time. There's an exercise I'm going to put up on Instagram this next week, and I'll put it up on my page, and I'm calling it the hedgehog experiment. So when anybody listening to this, if you're on Instagram, you can go to the little search button. Like on the bottom, there's a little magnifying glass. So I guess it's a little circle at a top, and click it, and you will learn instantaneously what Instagram thinks that you are, who Instagram thinks that you are, because it will show you all of the suggested posts based on posts that
It's
you've
called your
engaged in,
explore
right?
page, people. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you go, and I'll send you this for fun, but when I'll send you mine, I'll post about it. So when I do this, and I do this with students all the time, when I click my little button, my entire feed is filled with hedgehogs.
What?
Every single block is a hedgehog. There is nothing in my phone but hedgehogs. I call it
David,
the hedgehog
what
experiment. So I
is
started
going
with
on?
somebody close to me in my life about 6 months ago. We started sending each other hedgehogs. And I started to notice how they populated and dominated my social media sphere. So we kept it going. We sent hedgehogs to each other often. If right now, if I could do this live with your audience, I would go to my phone, I would click the button, and you would see hedgehogs in cute little glasses. You'd see, they're like really, done up. Like they're not just hedgehogs. They're hedgehogs like in tuxedos or like on, playing with
Oh my God.
it's like a
I'm going to
hedgehog on a
need you
unicycle.
after we're done recording to send me a photo through
I'm gonna send you the
Instagram.
hedgehogs. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what we it's massively they're everywhere. And so I always show them to the students, like, you have to be kidding me. There's nothing but hedgehogs on your Instagram. And I use it as an example. I'll ask them then, I'll say, if you're comfortable, because I never push them,
Yeah.
if you're comfortable, what does your grid look like?
Mhm. Yeah. You got to be careful asking a male. A
Now you
male
have,
to
well, right? I
share
mean,
that.
you know what? You want to talk about, that's what I honestly mean. I say when you're comfortable, because the phone has become a multi-purpose tool for all of these elements of entertainment and exploration. I would never in my life as a teacher or coach pull up a young person and say, show the class
Right.
what's on your phone. But what happens is students will hit the button and go, for one person, it's only a political ideology of a particular persuasion on every single grid. For somebody else, it's nothing but a sport that they like. It's all football, it's all punk rock, it's all whatever you've clicked on. So to circle back between brain health and psychological health, if I click on my phone all day, and I literally, when I go on Instagram, I see a couple of great pioneers like yourself, and I see a lot of hedgehogs. But if I click on my phone all day, I will decrease my dopamine levels and I will be neurophysiologically less motivated. But if what I see in my content stream is dystopian or divisive or negative or apocalyptic, I will then be psychologically terrified or angry or simply alienated to the point that I'm running into a psychological issue. So we're at a moment in time where young people are dealing with both the brain health implications of technology and the psychological implication of seeing whatever you click on magnified 100-fold. So the question is how, when I think of education, in our view, we need to prepare them for that complexity, to understand the technologies that we use, to understand the implications of them, to understand how to build a level of autonomy in our lives where we're not like watching our belief systems directed subtly by an algorithm. But that doesn't even come up because they're busy memorizing
Mhm.
facts from another generation or from another century.
Right. Okay, so we are doing a like pivot here in the topics. We are going to episode 257 with Ellen Yin. Ellen Yin is the host of Cubicle CEO. She like has had her face in Times Square. She's kind of a big deal. She's very cool. I have coached under her and learned quite a bit, just in the virtual world of working with brands, and how to position yourself for an optimal deal. And in this is like working with brands is more than just sponsored content. In this clip, she's going to explain the many ways that different creators can work with brands that go beyond just sponsored posts on social media, like leveraging your intellectual property, or working with companies that are product strong but content weak. If you haven't followed Ellen, she's fantastic. If you are looking to level up your kind of your virtual shingle, is what I call it, start to get some of that online money. Because I mean, there's some weird people making money online. Okay. Like just in the last week, there's a chick I found who dresses provocatively, and molds clay on a spinning wheel, and, very suggestive, just saying, and girlfriend's got, like, hundreds of thousands of followers. I am sure she also has an OnlyFans, so she's monetizing. Another one who, like, self-proclaims calls herself a fatty, which okay. She just films every day what she eats. And I didn't really go, like, super down the rabbit hole, but it was, like, kinda weird. Like, again, you can tell, like, this is provocative. She probably has an OnlyFans account, not confirmed, though. But, like, sometimes she's eating, like, a salad, so I'm like, "Wait, is she" but then she eats a donut for breakfast. And then I'm confused. Like, it's alright. I can be confused. It's not my business what she is trying to do with her body. My whole point is, like, there are people doing really creative and niche things out there, and honey, you can too. Like, you can too. So, here is episode 257 with Ellen Yin. So, I think that there is, so like if we have someone who, so let's just say they're a chiropractor,
Yeah.
and they went into this because they loved helping people. Like
Mhm,
that's what they loved. They loved the idea of helping people in their journey with health.
mhm.
But they're either like they're just kind of feeling stifled as far as their creativity and making decisions, and they want to make more money, and they don't feel like they have the capacity to do this. I
Mhm.
think that there's this beautiful opportunity with social media and
Yeah.
to, like, start a side hustle personal brand and
Mhm.
start working like, okay, like, just because you want, to have creative autonomy and make more money doesn't mean you have to start a chiropractic business. Show
Mhm.
up, adjust people, do that, but then, like, start this side hustle.
Mhm.
So you are, this kind of is your area of, like, working with brands. And how would you take someone if you were sitting down with someone and they were like, "Okay, I would like to start this side hustle.
Mhm.
My Instagram has been very like, here's my family at Easter, here's my dog, here's our vacation. Like, I really don't have any kind of personal brand happening right now." What
Yeah.
are some of those initial steps that you're recommending to someone?
Okay, so this kinda depends on, just to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. Are you asking, like, how do they get into the content game to create some sort of personal brand or platform that could be monetized?
Yes, yeah, I
Or
would say, like,
okay.
there's kind of, like there's probably the 3 steps before you would even think about pitching a brand. You need to have something because 'cause they're gonna look at your content and be like, "Okay." So, like, kind
Right.
of those pre-steps of, like, beginning to think about monetizing your social media? How do you start getting your shit together before you pitch a brand?
Well, I'm actually, this may not be the answer that you were
Oh, no,
expecting or
that's all
looking
right.
for, but I think it's really important to state here. Sponsored content to me is only one tiny layer of the brand partnerships iceberg. And I think most people only ever get stuck in that little tip and they never see all the vast potential below the water. Very few people do because most people think about brand partnerships from the angle of being an influencer or a content creator or full-time blogger.
Right.
Very few people approach brand partnerships from the lens of a business owner or a niche expert, which any of you listening to this podcast who are a chiropractor, you obviously are an expert, right, in what you do. And that is valuable to brands beyond just a sponsored post that you can throw up talking about them to your social media audience. So I just want to put that as a preface because,
Well, now I want you to talk more about the stuff below the water. Like, what does that
okay, yeah.
mean?
So what I mean by that is there's a lot of opportunities to work with brands that don't just look like, again, you talking about them on social media or even to other content channels like your newsletter or your blog or whatever. So some of the ways, for example, that you can work with brands is um actually a huge one for any niche experts like yourselves would be your leveraging your intellectual property, your IP that you've developed, how you specifically work with clients or how you've built up your business or whatever it may be, that you want to think about what are complementary brands that serve a similar audience as who your clients are. And they may be, let's say, product strong, but content weak. I'm going to give you an example of
I
this in my
was
own.
gonna say, like, I need an
Yes.
example, and you
Yeah.
don't have to make it about chiropractic.
Yeah,
Like,
I was gonna say it's probably gonna need to be in my own niche because
yeah,
I'm not, a
yeah.
chiropractic expert. But so let me just give you an example from our own business. So
Okay.
we serve small business owners and entrepreneurs, right? That's who our audience is. A brand who would also be targeting that same audience could be, let's say, a software brand, right? Or
Mhm.
a financial institution. Banks work with small business owners. An email marketing service provider works with small business owners. Those are great examples of brands that are product strong, but content weak. When was the last time you went to a bank's website and were like, oh my God, they blew me away with their content game? Or like,
Right.
right? Or their social media. Or like my favorite account to follow is my local credit union. Like probably not, right? And same thing with the software brand. Like you may use, like think about in your chiropractic business, you may use a certain, let's say, software to track all of your clients and billing and their patient records, right? You may use that in your day-to-day business. But do you feel like that software brand is killing it in the content game? Probably not. And so you can think about, okay, I have this niche expertise that can create valuable IP. That IP can be transferred to a brand like this that serves a similar audience, but they don't have the staff or the desire or the resources to create that on their own. How can I partner with them to create something like this that has value? So in my going back to my example, last year, I partnered with a local financial institution. They were a local credit union who serves business members through their business banking services, and they wanted to provide extra value to their business members by creating a workshop series on topics that business owners might be interested in, like publicity and marketing, and customer voice research, things like that. So I ended up partnering with them on a 3-part workshop series where I created, or I didn't even have to, I guess, necessarily create from scratch. These were presentations I've probably given before, either in my own programs or on stage at different conferences that I've spoken at. So I basically repurposed and refined these presentations and I did 3 virtual workshops. It was a 5-figure deal. I didn't promote anything to my audience. So I could have had 0 audience, right? Like 0 social media followers, 0 email lists. And it didn't matter because they weren't there to get audience distribution from me. They were there to leverage my intellectual property to provide value and content to their members. And so that's just an example of how
It
partnerships,
just clicked.
yeah,
Okay.
it's so much more than just sponsored content. Yes, sponsored content is a huge player in how you can, leverage and negotiate higher deals. Of course, if you have access to an audience that makes you more valuable, but keep in mind that is not the only way to work with brands. Is that helpful, Lauren?
It it is. Okay, next, we are taking another pivot. Oh, gosh, I am just it's so cool looking back at these episodes Because when you look at the entirety of everything, like all of the work and all of the guests that you've had, you just realize how many just amazing episodes happen over the course of a year, and like the cool people that you get to have conversations with. Um, I would say for those that are thinking about starting a podcast in 2025, one, reach out to me. Okay. Like, please. Like, this is not a competitive space. I'm not going to be like, I don't want to share my secrets with you. I don't have secrets. We all know that. Um, and I know I do talk some crap about podcasting. That's because it's true. Even Tony Ebel, who's starting his third podcast, is like, why didn't you tell me this was so hard? And I'm like, I did. I did tell you it was hard because it just keeps coming. But my favorite thing about podcasting is the doors that it opens for you in conversations with people that you would never normally get to sit and talk with for an hour. So this episode, this next clip, this is episode 244. So it's the second episode of the year. So you guys scroll way back, way back. Okay, early January. This is Dr. Nathan Riley, and he is an OB-GYN. The segment name is, we're calling it, is Giving Choice Back to Mothers. He has his own podcast. Oh shoot, I'm forgetting it right now. It's like the Holistic OB-GYN or something like that. Really cool guy. In the episode, not in the clip that we're sharing, but like in the full episode, he talks about basically his decision to pull out of the traditional bureaucratic hospital system and the issues that he faces as like a licensed OB-GYN delivering, like doing home births and things like that. But in this episode, Dr. Nathan explains how all the choices around birth and pregnancy should be with moms. Whoa, what a concept, right? And that the OB-GYN and doctor's job is just to give information, not to make the decisions for them or force them into any kind of standard protocol. So very empowering clip from him. Enjoy. So do you do any testing? Like what kind of tests do you do, or in your ideal world? What are mom's
Yeah.
like, whatever you think, Dr. Nathan.
Well, there's an issue with the question because it's not my job to tell you what to do or not to do. It's my job to educate you around the risks, benefits, and alternatives to any test, screen, intervention, or otherwise. And then when you make that decision, I can say, hey, listen, I don't do that. I don't do IV antibiotics in the home, frankly. So if we're going to do the GBS swab, here are going to be the options if it comes back positive. We can try an oral penicillin if you're allergic to that. It's very, very hard for us to do oral vancomycin. They do have oral vancomycin, but it's like, frankly, it's like the question as to what do I do or not do is not relevant. What do my clients ultimately decide? Most of my clients ultimately decide to do none of the things. The only one that's usually like 50-50 is the ROGAM injection, which is to prevent alloimmunization.
50-50?
Probably about that. Yeah.
How is 50%? Like in my brain, I didn't have to deal with that decision in my pregnancies, but like, even I didn't think that was optional. Like from a health standpoint, how are the women who are not getting it, how are they okay? Like, educate me, please.
Yeah, I mean, the risk of alloimmunization is something like 15%. If I recall, I'd have to go and look up the statistics, but I have had women. I mean, you have to consider where I'm located. Where are you located? Nebraska, did you say?
Wisconsin.
Oh, Wisconsin. Okay. So somewhere up there where nobody knows the different state boundaries. Gotcha. Kentucky's the same way. But people are like, where's Kentucky? And I'm like, it's in the South. Not really, though. It's kind of in the Midwest. Right. So in Wisconsin, as with many of the Great Lakes states, including Kentucky and a lot of the sort of northern South, we have huge Amish populations. They may have had babies and they may have Rh negative blood. I've had a woman give birth to her 8th baby and never get ROGAM. And she still has babies that she didn't alloimmunize, meaning she didn't develop antibodies against the Rh factor. And many of her babies were Rh positive. So the point here is that there is a risk. Are you willing to take that 15% risk or not? And if not, okay, like that's not on me, that's on you, right? If it was my wife and I don't know, it'd be hard pressed, but we weren't in that position. My wife and I are both, well, at least my wife, we both are positive, but as long as my wife is positive or any woman is positive, we don't have to worry about it. So yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, I can't force you to do anything. I can say, here's what I recommend. Here's why I recommend it. Here's the consequences of not doing that thing. And here's the benefits of doing it. One big thing that has emerged during the COVID years is that RH is made from whole blood. This RhoGAM is made from whole blood. So in theory, if there's something in the blood of contaminated people who got the vaccine, some people are worried, and I haven't been able to really sort this out yet for them. They're worried about spike protein or something else being
Mhm.
into this contaminated, through this contaminated blood. So, Mormons, or is it Mormons? I think Mormons are or Seventh-day Adventists, one of the two Christian groups that are predominant out in sort of the Western and mountain states, they will refuse RhoGAM because it's made from whole blood. They won't get blood transfusions. It's not a part of their theology. So, so this is how the conversation has to go.
Mhm.
It's not just you do it or you don't do it. It's let's have a big conversation around what this might mean. And if your baby is exposed to antibodies through alloimmunization because you didn't get RhoGAM in your first, your last pregnancy, that baby can become very sick and die in the uterus. So as long as you're willing to appreciate that there is a percentage of babies that will happen to, it's not my job to tell you, what to do. It's my job to really counsel you and then support you in your decision.
Oh my gosh. I can easily see how, I mean, I don't think I would be one of those brave women. Like I can easily see where we're so, how do I want to say this? I am less okay. I think we as a society are a lot less comfortable with babies dying than maybe they were in the 1800s type of thing. Like, right? Like, it's just like, okay, no, if there's a 5% chance, all of a sudden I'm like, I can't have a 5% chance of my baby dying. And like, I think infant mortality was more normal. Like you had a kid who was on the outside and then like a year and a half, they got that thing and they died, like it. And so it's like, we have gotten very, I don't want to say like, I can see how the hospital has this breeding ground of like, you're terrified of a point, because where's the percentage? Like, okay, so you say 15%. And I'm like, oh, sorry, Dr. Nathan. I couldn't do that. But then you're like, all right, 5%. I'm like, I think I'd still do it. Okay, 1%. Okay, well, now I'm getting a lot more comfortable, and so it's just like,
So Lauren, let me pose it like this to you. We have a hard time ascertaining risk when it comes to dead babies, right? I'll say what it is. Like we have a hard time saying dead babies. That's a
Yeah.
big part of the problem. Like sometimes babies don't survive no matter what we do.
Mhm.
Was that a failure of the medical sciences? Was that a bad doctor? Was that a bad midwife? Oftentimes, no, the baby just didn't make it through labor. And that is not something we're okay with, which is why we're willing to force your legs open and have somebody hold you down and force our hand inside of you to quote, check on the cervix or the baby or whatever, which doesn't
Right.
make any lick of sense outside of very, very rare circumstances. If you were to walk into a casino and you had like $5,000 on you, burning a hole in your pocket, and you walk over to like, I don't know, the blackjack table, not blackjack, craps or something, right? Or roulette, and you put all your money down on one spot. And the likelihood of you winning is 1 in 100. Let's say it's 1 in 100, right? It's 1%. If you were to win all that money, would you say, I'm damn, like, of course I won all that money? No, you would say that was fucking lucky of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we do a different sort of, we have a hard time ascertaining risk when it comes to the lives of babies. And that's in part because we're afraid of mortality altogether. But it's also really important to mention that when a baby dies or when a mom dies, there is very, very, very little support that comes in the way of any of these agencies, hospital administrators, social services in order to help that father care for that baby now without their mother, or for that couple to seek out some support over, this bad thing that happened, their baby dying. So we don't do a great job of supporting you. So of course we're afraid, because it's not just afraid of the baby dying and you losing a piece of you, which is probably the hardest thing any woman or partner, can go through. It's also that like, you're going to be alone with these feelings for the rest of your life. And that really sucks. Like we have a lot to work on the other side of this as well.
Okay. So the last clip of part 1, best of 2024 episodes, is our number 1 downloaded episode of the entire year. My Spotify Wrapped told me hands down, this was your favorite episode. And I'm really proud because it is with one of my besties, Dr. Stephanie Wigner, the wealthy practitioner. There's no way you don't know her because I've talked about her a ton. Her and I and Dr. Elise Rigney put on a conference together. We're kind of big deal. No, just kidding. We laugh, we have fun, and we talk about all sorts of serious stuff. This clip is serious. Don't worry. I would not feed you mumbo jumbo. So, if you haven't listened to this episode, you need to. Then you are living under a rock. Go listen. It's episode 269. We're calling the segment Opportunity is Everywhere. And in this episode, like, so this isn't the traditional episode if you go back and listen where like I'm just host and she's just guest, because Dr. Steph has her own podcast, The Wealthy Practitioner. And so we both recorded our own intros and released it on our episode. She has shorter episodes. I think I kind of forced her into a longer episode when recording with me, but we are discussing in this clip rewiring your brain to an abundance mindset and how quickly you start to see opportunity everywhere you look once you've done that. Enjoy. But now I just think about my children and like, I don't remember where I learned it. Like, I think it was, like I said, it was the podcast first. First came the podcast. And then I started like talking to people, chiropractors who have massive clinics and massive impact and massive wealth, but then like non-chiropractors. And I'm just like, oh, wow, you're all kind of saying a lot of the same things, which I've never really been exposed to before. And so now even like the way I view like a vacant lot of like, is that a parking ramp?
Is that
Is the
available?
Could we put a parking ramp there? Because that sounds sexy. Like, are they really selling that laundromat? What, like, oh man, I wanna, the way that your brain shifts to start to look for opportunities is, I think, the big is all right.
An unlock.
I would argue, I think that is step one of the awakening of like, you're exposed to it and you're like, whoa, what? And then you just start to like view your world as different opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. And you're just like, I think business in general does that. I remember like studying different marketing tactics that people do around the holidays, right? Like it kind of starts with that when you start seeing all of these Black Friday sales and you're like, wait, why are they doing that? Like, how are they driving their revenue? What is their sense of urgency or the sense of FOMO? And then you can apply it to your business. I view marketing and sales in other industries and bring it back to chiropractic. I do the same thing with wealth building or gathering some of those assets that'll pay me in the future. I was joking with my friend the other day and we were like, okay, sure. Do we have $1 million sitting in our bank account? No.
You
If
get
that
access
was
to
the
it though.
Yeah, but we have access to it, right?
Yep.
And it's like, I remember for the longest time, it was just get my savings up, get my savings up, get my savings up, because that was the security and the blanket and that sense of just safety that I needed. But it wasn't until I started studying wealth that I was like, most people are like, Elon Musk is severely in debt based on investing in his companies and investing in assets, right? Like if you buy a rental property, unless you're paying cash for it, you have debt on that. And debt's always been viewed as bad. And so it's like, is debt working for you or against you? Those are two different things. And then I started looking at people and I was like, okay, I don't really know that many people. Once your operating expenses are covered and you have a little bit of a nest egg inside of your business, they're not just stacking money in a regular savings account and waiting for a rainy day. And growing up, that was what you did because you weren't sure that more was coming. And so for me, when I started studying what other people were doing and reading books and podcasts and learning from people who have done it, I was like, oh yeah, I think I've been doing the wrong thing and I need to learn from people who have done it.
What were some of the most, like, do you remember any like moments or specific people or like what were some of those like biggest aha moments that you had?
Well, for me, it was like once we had our basic needs covered and not basic, they're much better than other places in the world, right? We are
Right.
very fortunate to live in the US and have the opportunities
Right.
we do and make the kind of money we do. But once that was covered, we were like, okay, once we realized sitting on this money in our savings wasn't the best option and it wasn't going to get us closer to our goals, we were like, how are we going to get there? And we knew that we wanted to be a part of real estate, but it wasn't like we had info on real estate. We didn't have like a box that we had to check off. We just started buying properties. And again, I'm like, I wish we would have hired a real estate coach or studied for more people who were well invested in real estate. So a lot of the things that we did in real estate was like trial and error, but it was at least the first stepping stone to learning, okay, I'm going to take this $30,000 and put it towards a down payment. And yes, the income on that house might not be as much because it's a long-term, low income property, but I get tax advantages. And I also am building up equity and somebody else is paying the mortgage. And originally, when we first started looking at real estate, it was like, okay, well, we're not getting that excited about, 400 extra dollars a month. Like we don't even touch our real estate income because we don't need it, luckily.
Right.
And so, but it's going to be there when we want to capitalize on more opportunities. And so I don't even really think I answered your question because I don't even remember. Cause I feel like I fell on my face so much that there wasn't somebody really guiding me in that arena.
I do think real estate was like, I don't want to call it a game because I'm sure some people would be offended to that, but like, it's just so, I mean, real estate, how come nobody told us about real estate? Like I feel like every like college class, no matter what your degree, should just be like, okay, but here's why. Like you buy a thing. I'll break this down to a kindergartner right now in case you're like, you buy a thing. So you do have to get the money for the down payment for the thing. And should you be conscious of like what your interest price or like, your loan is there? Yes, please do. You get someone to pay the mortgage on said thing by renting it from you. You do that for 10 years. Said thing is completely paid off now. Or maybe it's longer, depending on, whatever. And you can then sell it. You can also borrow against it. Like it's just the duplicity of it of like, oh, well, now we're we bought this thing for 300,000 and we've paid off 80,000 of it. And now all of a sudden, hey, look, you can get a HELOC. Like now you
Yes,
can
and
use
take that money back out and do it again.
and you can do it again. And now you have two. And so then you are 55 years old. You started this game when you were 30 and you have 7 properties. You have 12 properties, whatever you have that someone else has basically been paying off for you. And now they've accrued value because real estate does. Like, I mean, yes, there's the
So
like
the other thing that gets like comes up for me when we're talking about this is even just so like real estate's one asset, right? It's like one option, I should say, in order to take your profits. But like I just love our conversation with Elise the other day when we're talking about content for Chiro WealthCon. She's like, oh, well, I'm going to teach them how I was my own bank. And how I'm opening these new practices and not even getting money from the bank. And I'm like, nobody knows that. Nobody knows that they could do that, or that's also available to them. And then so when I think of real estate, I'm like, damn, I also wish I would have started investing in whole lives, even like $100, $200 a month, right when I opened my practice, because I could have budgeted for it, right? So there's bigger plays, there's little plays, there's riskier plays, there's
well,
less
and I think it
riskier
depends on
plays.
how old you are, is how big and how risky, of like, if you're listening, if you're going to Chiro WealthCon and you're in your 20s, like I envy you because you don't have to you're going to learn that like, you don't have to make a big risky play. You just need to freaking start.
Yes.
Start. Now, if you're in your 50s, you have less time for this like game, but there's still things there's still so many things.
Yeah. And I think that just us being able to share those options with other people is like an unlock. When we were talking about it, like we wish we would have just had a conference like this or a mentor who could teach on all these different aspects because it would have shortened our runway to getting to where we are now.
That's exactly what it is we did have conferences. We did have mentors over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Like this is like us going like, oh shit. Okay. It took us 15 years to like start grasping these huge things. And you kind of like look back and you just go like, oh, they need this.
Yeah.
Like, they need this bad.
I want it to be only 2 years for them or 3 years for them. Right.
Okay, that concludes the clips of part 1, Best of 2024. I hope you loved them. Please, if you are brand new to the podcast, couple things. Clicking that subscribe and like button really helps a girl out, like a lot. In the beginning of the episode, I said, I've got plans. I want to get to the top 1%. And so clicking that does help us. I would love a review. We didn't get a ton of them in 2024. So, like, if you haven't gotten around to writing a review, I would really, really appreciate it. Share this episode on social media, either on Instagram or Facebook. That would be incredible. And I'm going to close us out with um, my what's it called? Affirmation. That is now my screensaver. And this is going to be my affirmation of 2025. I am so grateful that abundance flows to me effortlessly and easily, consistently on a daily basis. So I hope you steal that too. And I can't wait to share part 2 with you. Until next week, She Slayers. Bye.